Hi, I'm Dr. Jack Looney, Professor Emeritus and former chair of the Environmental Earth and Ocean Sciences Department at the University of Massachusetts, Boston. I developed a love for the sea and a love for the harbor as a young boy growing up during World War II, clamming, shellfishing, hauling lobster pots from a rowboat out off of Fourth Cliff, and that interest was parlayed into a vocation as well as my avocation, which focused on marine environments. I classify myself as a shallow water oceanographer, very much interested in marshlands and in this harbor. And my first recollection coming out here as a young lad, my family belonged to the Medford Boat Club, and in those days there were locks in Medford Square. And you'd go from the boat club, from the Mystic Lakes down to the Mystic River, out into the harbor. And as an early scuba diver, we used to go for lobsters off of Rainsford Island, and then we'd camp out on Rainsford and cook our lobsters in seawater and have a feast on the weekends, and then go back to school or back to work or whatever we were doing. Uh, at Boston State College before UMass, I taught oceanography and marine resources. And in that capacity, we would take students out to view the pocket beaches, to view the harbor. We would go to the marshes. We would identify marsh plants, marsh vegetation, back beach vegetation, both the land and the sea plants. At UMass Boston, I had decided that it wasn't good enough with the environment that we had. It wasn't good enough just to talk about these things. It wasn't good enough just to show pictures. It would have been better if we could go out onto the islands. So I had taken at various times students out anywhere from 4 to 5 days camping on various Boston Harbor islands. We camped on Calf, on Brewster, on Grape. We've been to Pettix. I've had students that have been very active in work in Boston Harbor. One of my students is a tugboat captain. Another of my students was the president of the Mass Bay Lobstermen's Association. So needless to say, when we were camping out on the islands, we prevailed upon her to have fresh lobsters, and our final break-up dinner on the island was lobster. So we basically botanized and geologized the different islands, looking at everything from orientation of pebbles and cobbles on the beach to location of sand, the different degree of slope of the beach. We would do transects coming up from the low water line. So we had a very good idea of what was happening in Boston Harbor. At the same time that that was going on, I was teaching anatomy and physiology at the School of Nursing at Boston City Hospital, and that was located at that time on Long Island. And so I used to sneak out. We would sneak out from classes and whatever, and I know I was not supposed to wander on Long Island, but we did wander out on the island, and I'm probably one of the last people that have wandered all over the emplacements on Fort Strong. And I would agree with the mayor that this is a place that you do not want to open up because even 10, 15 years ago, the cement works, the revetments, the gun emplacements, and so on, when you consider anywhere from 50 to 75 years of age of that cement exposed to the elements, it was not in good shape. So I think it's a good idea that unless somebody is willing to spend a goodly amount of money to refurbish or to do some work on the island's infrastructure on Long Island, I would probably not be in favor of allowing individuals to come out there. I've also shot at the Boston Police pistol range, and it was supposed to be a pistol range. Nothing stronger than sidearms were to be shot there, but I understand now that that has been modified and it does fill a different role. There is after the shootings, the drive-by shootings on Peaceville Street, the university wanted someone to try to get the youngsters, the middle school kids and the early high school kids off the street. And so in the summer I had 15 students that worked out on Long Island, and I supervised them in cutting a figure-8 nature trail that went from the drumlin at the entrance to Long Island from the bridge. Just on the right-hand side there was if you go down about 1,000 yards, there's a cemetery, and before you get to the cemetery we cut a trail. When I say cut, we just primarily picked up the brush, moved the brush, and the dead branches that were on some of the pine trees we took off to about I'd say 5-6 feet so somebody wouldn't lose an eye on them. And the figure-8 nature trail that brought you to the beach was done in a 1/4 mile and a 3/4 mile segment. So you could do a short walk, or you could do a long walk, or you could do a longer walk. Also, I was on Long Island shortly after the superintendent's house was used as a safe house. The safe house during the post-Valhalla incident that had to do with the breakup of the mafia, some of the principals were sequestered on Long Island in the former superintendent's house, and the logic was that if they were there, it would be almost impossible for anyone to get to them because the Coast Guard was patrolling the water and there were licensed and armed police manning the gate across the Long Island Bridge. So there's I've been involved in some of the machinations on Long Island. On Coff Island, we were out on Coff Island in the late 1980s, and everything that we did was geared to cleaning up and moving some of the plastic. One of the biggest incidences that we found was proliferation of plastic waste on the islands. And that came from polypropylene rope, that came from discharged oil cans, plastic oil, quad oil containers, I should say, rather than cans. And to go back one moment to the Long Island, we had part of what I did with the 15 students that we had on Long Island, we picked up and removed plastic from the beach, and there were 3 dump truck loads of plastic that the city came out and picked up that we were responsible for, that the students were responsible for. So not only did they do some what I would call WPA work, but they also did some botanizing and geologizing on the island. So it was a work and learning situation, much similar to what I had done with the students, the undergraduate students at the University of Massachusetts, as we camped out on the Harbor Islands. At that time, my logic was not to be destructive or damage in collecting specimens. We, at that time, Polaroid Corporation was very much a going concern, and from Polaroid we were able to get the loan of their instant cameras. And so rather than to extract, rather than to press, rather than to collect vegetation by destroying it or by digging it up or whatever, the students were required to photograph. And of the 2 10-packs of film that they had to do a photo essay of no more than 15 photographs that made a point, and they could use no more than 50 words in this photo essay. So we found that as one way. Hilton's Tent City helped us out by providing the tents, and the university transported us out to the islands. So everything that came onto the island came back off of the island. And later on, that experience, I became a member of the Navy's Keystone Study Group, which made the classic report to the United States Congress on the environmental Navy, and which had led to very strong changes in what the Navy does with its vessels inshore and onshore, so that, for example, every vessel over destroyer size, so destroyers, cruisers, carriers, LPDs, etc., all have the capacity to 100% control, maintain the waste stream from medical, food, gray and black water, etc. So these have been some of the things that it plays out in aiding to the cleanliness of Boston Harbor. When I first started doing work in the harbor using a Secchi disc, we had an 18-inch visibility. The last time that I used a Secchi disc in the harbor, we were up to 56 inches. So from my standpoint, when Boston Harbor did rank as the most polluted of the 99 estuaries in the United States, it no longer does. I don't know if there's a rating like that any longer, but from what I have observed and from what I have seen, Boston Harbor certainly is much more clean now than it was before. And I'm happy to have had a little part of that by educating the students, over the last 50 years that I've been teaching teaching about the environment and having students out in the harbor. There is a vessel, a research vessel that the university has with my name on it. It's a former inshore Coast Guard buoy tender. It has a 400-mile range. It can lift 10,000 pounds from 250 feet on the bottom. It is used by the university and by various agencies that want or need the use of a vessel such as that. So that is still at sea. It's also a Class 3 icebreaker. 3 years ago, it was used to break up the ice in the harbor so that you could get to Marina Bay, where there was a boat on fire, a boat burning at the dock during the winter, and so on. So there are different ways of fallout, different aspects of fallout that have occurred. At the present time, the one little anecdote I'll tell you about, I was requested a number of years ago when Ted Williams Tunnel was being dug. There was to be 12 million cubic feet of fill put on Spectacle Island. And in conversation with then Congressman Moakley, uh, he had asked innocently what my feelings were on that, and I said I thought it was gross. I thought that there was going to be too much fill, and from my reading of the environmental impact study that was done, I felt that it was incomplete, and had it been more complete, that would not have happened. And he said, well, can you give me an illustration? I said, well, one thing that was missing was what was called the Terzaghi calculation. Carl Terzaghi was a geologist from Harvard who talked about compression factor, and dewatering. I said, think about it this way. Let's take 2 pieces of dark wheat bread. Let's put peanut butter, marshmallow, and jelly as filler on the wheat bread. Let's double bag it, put it in a baggie, put it on a chair, and then sit on it. And I said, that's what's going to happen. And in essence, the 12 million cubic feet of fill went down to 3 million. So Spectacle Island is not as high as it would have been had that not happened. So at that time too, there were PAHs and heavy metals that were leaching out from Spectacle Island, because Spectacle Island, as you know, was a rendering plant and then a dump. And a lot of people don't realize what rendering plants were and were about. There was another one in Somerville on the Mystic River where the Mystic Sailing Club was located for years. It was called Hinckley Rendering. And what would happen is, as horses would die, cattle would die, and so on, we used to have a very active farming community of horses and cows. And when I was a young kid growing up in the 30s and 40s, there were a lot of small dairies. And when these animals would die, they were butchered and so on. And the hair was collected. Horse hair became filler for mattresses. And that's one of the reasons why you have the tag now. If you remove this tag from a mattress, there's a $10,000 penalty or 10 years in jail, going back to that, because that's how typhus and bed bugs, and now bed bugs are having a resurgence. I don't think it's because of horsehair, because the rendering plants have been closed, but whatever. Long-winded way of saying that the compression factor, that by having less fill on the island, I think we would, on Spectacle Island, we would have less potential for leachate, especially the PAHs, the heavy metals, and those potential contaminants that could have caused more of a problem in the harbor. I'm happy that the Coley count, when we did Coley counts off of Constitution Wharf, which is where the Coast Guard is located, and off of the New England Aquarium, the Coley counts were over 10,000 per ml, per 100 mLs of water. And basically, the water was so polluted, it was referred to as being the coliform count was too numerous to count, so the water should have been closed, and in fact it was. And that led to sewerage going down Atlantic Avenue, reconfiguration of Atlantic Avenue, the Coast Guard installing manifolds so that they no longer could pump from their vessels into the harbor, and now you had containment of potential pollutants from the Coast Guard base into the Water and Sewer Department. So I think that we've seen an awful lot of changes in my almost 75 years now, 50 years professional interest in the harbor. We've seen a harbor that's a lot more cleaner, a harbor that can support recreation, a harbor that now is among the third largest passenger harbors, passenger ports in the United States. And when you consider that our passenger service basically goes from May to October, whereas, say, the Florida ports and the California ports are open all year long, the impact on the harbor with multiple vessels, sometimes up to 5 passenger vessels, very large vessels coming into the harbor, posing minimal environmental impact on the harbor. So Boston Harbor and the environmentalists in Boston have got an awful lot, should receive an awful lot of praise for what they've done. Save the Harbor, Save the Bay has been one of the leaders and one of the drivers in this, and I know that the various, both the federal and the state courts have been prime movers in this, whether it was Judge Garrity or Judge Mazzone from the feds.